Hey everybody, happy Friday. So thanks for joining us for a live show. Let's dive right into the controversial topic, I guess, of the week here. There we go, which has to be the Tasman truck. What do you think?
That is controversial. It took the world by storm. Now we don't know if we're getting it here in the US yet, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
We know that was the worldwide release or the global release.
He is cagey, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get it eventually. The question is sort of when.
Yeah.
I think it's fugly.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking about it for the last couple of days. I want to say that I like it, but I almost feel like I'm offending people if I say I like it. It's almost so ugly, it's cool.
Yeah,
We'll have to see it in person.
If you haven't seen it, let's find a picture of it here. There we go. So everybody knows what we're talking about. You know, I'm the front for me. I just can't.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna be one of those vehicles that when you see it in
the back. I actually am okay with the back, but what's cool about this one is there's a standard cab.
Yeah, that is
long bed.
I would be surprised if we get that at that.
We can only hope that is even cooler.
Now that changes
the chassis version. I mean, I think that looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
The interior also, I think, looks pretty good, but the front, oh my, ooh, what happened? I
don't mind it a whole lot, to be honest with you. I think it's ugly, but I don't think it's the worst vehicle I've ever seen.
Ooh.
We'll just have to see what it looks like in person because it can change your mind when you see a vehicle in person. But And
Yeah,
that's also a rendering, so it might look different.
yeah, pretty close though. I mean, they did say that that is the confirmed final international one. I don't know. I will say, the Kia and Hyundai have both said lately that they are trying to change their styling. They've been, lampooned as being too Me Too over the years, and now they really just want to have styling that breaks out from the box and is uniquely Kia, uniquely Hyundai, and they're both trying this. And sometimes I think that's good, and sometimes I'm like,
I think they might be overreaching a tad bit.
yeah, like, it's a little much. So I am really curious to see what it's like when it does come, because this is not related to the Santa Cruz at all. This is a completely unique new truck platform, body on frame. It'll tow over 7,700 pounds. The
Oh,
numbers are
wow.
all really good. So if it was here in the US, it would have class leading towing. It would be almost class leading payload, as I recall. It's like nearly 2,600 pounds of payload. Um,
That's pretty good.
yeah, 311 pound-feet of torque from the 2.5-liter turbo. They basically snagged the engine and transmission out of a Genesis and jammed it in the back of this thing, or the front of this thing. So I'm just really curious to see how that goes.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to throw over.
Yeah,
I mean, the truck market has been very much the same for a very long time. Obviously,
yeah, same
revisions here
players.
and
Yeah,
there. Kia throwing a wrench in there would be interesting. I'm
hmm,
excited to see, and I'm excited that it's even on the forefront, like that's even coming along. So
right.
we'll see.
I,
It's polarizing for sure.
Exactly. Especially when we talk about the body on frame truck segment, the only non-American body on frame trucks that we get here basically are the Nissan and the Toyota. I mean, that's the Tacoma and the Frontier. It's it, because the Ridgeline's a unibody truck based on a Pilot. So is the Santa Cruz. It's a unibody vehicle. And we don't even have a midsize truck from the Chrysler group of companies. Ram doesn't have a midsize truck. The Dakota, it's long since dead.
Yeah.
So I'm casually curious, and the other thing about the Tasman is it's not small. It's actually bigger than a Ranger. I think it's like 4 or 5 inches longer than a Ford Ranger.
Hmm. That'll
So
be interesting. Yeah,
could actually have a usable back seat.
that'll be fun. I'm excited for that.
Let's move on to another one of these here. Did you see any questions that were interesting? So be sure and comment down there in the question section, everybody, if you want to ask any questions.
We had one about the Kia Sorento versus
Ah,
the Santa
yes.
Fe. So I'll let you start off on that.
Oh yeah, and then when is the next generation Highlander coming out? That's a good question. We don't know, but the rumor mill is telling us that we won't get a next generation Highlander for a while. So the last I've heard recently, about last month, was that we're going to get a refreshed Highlander, and the refreshed Highlander, known as the Kluger internationally. Am I forgetting exactly how many letters there are in that? It looks like, because of its general age, it's not going to get a full redesign. It'll be a refresh with a new nose, maybe some new interior options, and possibly another hybrid system. I don't know. Based on looks, how do you feel about the Santa Fe?
It's one of those things where I think they might be overreaching in their in trying to differentiate themselves from other vehicles with their design. It's polarized. I was actually in the car with some family members recently, and they go, "What in the
What
world
is
is
this
that
thing?
ugly vehicle?" I'm like, I kind of think it's cool looking, but if I were to have to pick one to purchase, it's definitely going to be the Sorento
Hmm.
rather than the Santa Fe, because I do believe that the Santa Fe's extreme designs
Mm-hmm.
are going to age poorly. It's one of those things where it
Uh,
could age great and it could look great
hmm.
down the road. Just like one company I always refer to as BMW, they're always pushing the envelope with their design, and it takes a couple of years to settle in, and people start to come around to it, like the kidney grills.
Mm-hmm.
And with Kia and Hyundai, it's like they're
If they
kind of
continue to sell well, I think that people will
yeah,
come around.
yeah. But we'll see. I mean, 5 years down the road, if it
Mm-hmm.
ages well, then good for them. They nailed it out of the park. But I don't know. I would pick the Sorento personally. What about you?
Mm. I I think if it was just hybrid versus hybrid, I might go Santa Fe, because the interior is a bit more practical. That third row is really usable, even though it's not very big on the outside. It's more Highlander sized than Grand Highlander. The third row is just really practical, and I like that big boxy practical part of it. I think the interior also is really attractive. The exterior takes some getting used to. Um, if you could include the plug-in hybrid Sorento, I think I would plug-in hybrid Sorento, because that, I think, is just a really good blend of features. So you get basically the same fuel economy, you get some electric range, you get a little bit of extra power. Um, I think that's probably the direction that I would go. Now, would we pick those over the Highlander hybrid, that is a tricky one. I would say some of that depends on how long you plan on keeping your vehicle. Like if you plan on keeping this till the wheels fall off, that Toyota hybrid system has been really, really reliable.
Now, this isn't necessarily a question, but I want your opinion on it because I haven't talked to you about this
Ah,
yet. What are your thoughts on the Scout or on
I
the Scouts?
I'm really intrigued to see how this goes for Volkswagen. And when we should say this part that, Volkswagen owns 100% of Scout. Volkswagen is trying to position Scout as if it was a brand new, totally independent startup. It is just a division of Volkswagen. How separate it is from the rest of Volkswagen North America now and long term, that remains to be seen. There's certainly some Volkswagen going on, even though for the moment. The styling, definitely unique, but software, etc., it looks like that's going to be sharing from Volkswagen. It looks like some portion of the software is also going to be shared with Rivian, thanks to the Volkswagen Rivian deal. I am really excited to see how that range extending model comes in, because apparently even though this is a brand new electric startup that we've all been hearing about for a while, the inclusion of that range extending model with the gasoline engine, that was kind of more recent news than getting confirmed, of course, at the launch. And apparently 80 something percent of pre-orders are the range extending gas model.
Interesting. So, how does that work any different than a series hybrid?
It's not, it's the same.
It's the
So
same,
yeah,
just
just
kind of
just
rebranded.
yeah, they're just trying to go, don't pay any attention to behind the curtain. And they don't want to call it a plug-in hybrid for some reason, even though that is absolutely exactly what that is. Let's go down to the super chat we have here, because we have one super chat here. There we go. How's this for love? Aw, thanks for the super chat, William.
Thank you.
Moving along, let's go here. Someone bought a Nissan Versa SR for 2024. Well, friends tell us this is foolish. Should have bought a 24 Corolla instead for reliability. Are they correct? I would say no. I would say you were correct, especially if you're looking for something inexpensive. So most likely that Nissan Versa is going to be less expensive than the Corolla long term, not just because of its lower acquisition price, but the ongoing cost of maintenance, insurance, everything is going to be less expensive on it. Will it be as reliable? I would say no, probably not. Statistically, that's what we know. But remember that if you save enough money on the car, then reliability honestly becomes a little bit less essential in a way. Um, this is something that I know sometimes falls on deaf ears, but if you pay $20,000 less for a car, even if you have to replace an engine or a transmission over its lifetime with you, it's still going to be a lot less expensive
Yeah.
because the parts just aren't that expensive to repair.
Yeah. I think the Versa is a good car.
Yeah.
I think it's
It's
kind
cheap
of
and cheerful.
yeah, it's kind of looked past. I
Hmm.
think people will look past it because it's a small little tiny car and it's cheap and that's
Yeah.
what a lot of people are looking for. I mean, people don't want to spend a ton of money on a vehicle. I think you couldn't go wrong with either one of them, whether you go for the 24
Hmm.
Corolla or the 2024 Versa SR.
Yeah.
So I think
Especially at $21,000 out the door.
that's
I mean,
crazy.
that
That's
is
unbelievable. It's
you'd be
unheard of,
paying
really.
thousands and thousands more for a Corolla.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I don't think it's worth the extra money.
yeah, that's the tricky bit. Is it worth extra money? I would say no. If you were looking at Civic and you wanted more performance and more better handling and that kind of thing, maybe. But I mean, we'd also be talking something that's at least 30% more expensive. I mean, that's a huge price difference.
Now, kind of bouncing back to a last question, but I wanted to hear your point of view on this because
Ah,
you have a
yeah.
lot more insight into sales
Hmm.
and that side of the world. What is your opinion on this? Because I have seen just a tiny bit
Hmm.
online how the dealers are a little bit upset.
Yeah, the dealers are definitely not liking the Scout direct sales model. And I I wonder if the dealers are going to get any traction in court on this, because it does look like lawsuits are being planned.
It makes
Whether they've
sense.
been filed or not yet, we don't know. Yeah, that's the question. It's like, since they are 100% owned by Volkswagen, is this going to be winnable in court for the dealers? It's hard to say because we haven't seen a car company try this. The only direct sales car companies out there are the startups. And then tangentially, we have like Polestar, that obviously was half owned by Volvo, now is wholly owned by the parent company of Volvo. But they did not try the direct sales model. They tried like an in-between where they're rejiggering the franchise sales agreements considerably. But if this works, then I think it will be a big win for Volkswagen. Let's put it that way. I'm not a big dealer fan. Are you? I mean, I don't want to go buy my car from a dealer.
I've also worked in dealerships most of my adult life, and I could see I could see the frustration, but I can also see it being a slippery slope that if this does work and Volkswagen is successful in selling the Scout direct to consumer, what's next? Is it Volkswagen? Is it Audi? You know what I mean? So it's like there's a lot of money in dealerships.
And they should all be burnt at the stake like witches. Halloween was yesterday. I'm sorry, but yeah, dealers are the problem, and the reason it's probably never going to slippery slope over to anything else is the nature of dealer agreements. So dealers are franchises. Like your Honda dealer and your Ford dealer are just like a McDonald's. So, they license the name. And the big problem is the way these franchise agreements are written, a lot of them specifically say that the manufacturer cannot engage in direct sales. And there are state laws that say if there are franchise dealers in a state, you can't do direct sales. So there's that kind of little problem there. And then also these franchise agreements are all terminating at different times. So like, I have a Volkswagen dealership and I signed the agreement 5 years ago. You signed it 10 years ago. These agreements aren't terminating at the same time and they're getting renewed all the time. Worse yet, some manufacturers have lifetime franchises. So like they sold it once for a huge amount and it's perpetual, it's forever. So there's no way to break that franchise agreement. And that's the big reason that traditional manufacturers, they would all love to see an end to this. It's not rational. Startups, though, this could be Volkswagen's way of tiptoeing down this road and then really trying to put the thumb screws on the dealers and trying to radically change dealer agreements, I would hope.
Yeah, this person has a point.
Yeah, that's the thing. Dealers had to pay a lot of money for it. So, and that's this uncertain thing. The manufacturer theoretically could buy them all back, but I don't think any manufacturer could afford that. That's the reality. And they can't do this piecemeal. It's not like they can go start buying dealers back and then over time suck them back in. Ford tried it actually a while back in Texas, and Ford did not do a good job managing that set of dealers, and there were lawsuits everywhere, and it just turned into this huge bottomless pit of money for them.
This one's a tough one.
Oh yeah,
this one's a tough one because one drivetrain has years and years of abuse, and the other one is pretty brand new. But I have had experience in this 3-liter fairly recently, and I loved it.
The 3-liter is fantastic.
It's great. It's a very peppy motor for a 3-liter. Now
that's the big thing, is it has so much power.
The 10-speed, I've always, and I hope I don't get too much flack for this in the comments, but I've always been kind of opposed to 10 speeds. I find it to be, if they aren't tuned perfectly,
or if it's not on your Schwinn, you're not going to win.
No? Yeah, it's not on my Huffy. I don't want it. No, sometimes if they're not tuned properly, or they don't have enough power behind it, I find that they do a lot of gear hunting. Sometimes I find myself when I'm accelerating out of a corner, it doesn't know what gear to be in. It's just a little bit clunky. So the 8-speed is almost a perfect balance between having enough gears to get the economy, but not being clunky and gear hunting all the time. So I think that the 8-speed, never found an issue with it. I drove a Ram Rebel fairly recently. The review will be coming out here shortly. But I drove it about 500 miles in a week, and I never found myself wanting more power. I never found myself wanting more gears. It got decent economy, fairly normal for the trucks of its competitors. But I don't know. I can't say which one's better because I can't drive them side by side. But I think the 3-liter is an interesting platform. I think it has a lot of potential. Yeah,
the 3-liter is obviously smoother. It has that classic inline 6 spark. If you get it in the Ram RHO, it sounds kind of like a BMW M product, which is hilarious. For good reason, because they use 3-liter inline 6s as well. The Ram 3-liter has a little bit less engine braking than Ford's 3.5, but neither one has a whole heap of a lot. So a lot less engine braking is going on there. I will say that ZF's 8-speed just has a fantastic reputation. It's a great feeling 8-speed, and that's part of why I think a lot of people like it. Like the shifts are crisp and great. The 10-speed has a broader ratio spread, so it does have a deeper first and a taller 10th. So you are going to get different mechanical advantage through that 10 speed. If I just had to pick just on drivetrain, though, I would probably go for the Ram and that 3-liter inline six. We don't know, obviously, what long-term reliability will be. Oddly enough, and this is going to cause all sorts of hate, I'm sure, in the comments. Oddly enough, the North American side of Stellantis has actually had pretty decent luck with engines over the last few decades or so. There have been some complaints about the Hemi and the lifter tapping, etc., but that's not a huge deal for a lot of
It's not a
people.
huge deal if the consumer catches it fast.
Yeah, and it's like it actually has been less problematic than GM's pushrod V8s with their variable
Yeah.
displacement systems.
Yeah.
We've had multiple Hemis; they've all been fine. The Pentastar has actually been one of the most, oddly enough, one of the most reliable engines in North America, and they made a ton of them. They were making over 1 million of them a year in the heyday, and they're still going strong. They're still actually sticking some Pentastars in random things here and there. And the 2-liter turbo has generally been okay so far. So most of their engines have been fine. With that in mind, it is a brand new engine design in a brand new line, so it doesn't share much with anything other than the 2-liter turbo. And structurally, it's not sharing that much with the 2-liter turbo. So all of the usual like startup production line issues can happen. And as we've seen with Toyota, even Toyota can have really bad problems with a brand new engine and brand new engine manufacturing line. So
yeah, I'm excited to see, or I'm nervous but excited to see what this 3-liter has to
mhm.
offer in the coming years.
Let's answer this one because this is an interesting question. I think that we will see more serial hybrids in the future, but I think that a lot of the serial hybrids will be advertised as range extending EVs, like the Ram Charger. They're calling it a range extending EV. The Scout, that's what they're trying to call it as well. It's just a serial plug-in hybrid. There's no difference. There's no separate SAE category for this or legislative definition for this, etc. It's all marketing. But on pure serial hybrids, I don't think we're really going to be seeing that many of them because Nissan, you noticed this too, because Nick went to the Murano event, which we should talk about in a bit. Nissan has said basically that they realized that the e-Power hybrid system, which we've been saying for a long time, in Europe just doesn't fit North America's needs because the fuel economy on the highway is pretty terrible. And that's why they're going to be changing it for North America. We don't know what that means,
No,
though.
they didn't give any insight on that.
So we are going to get a different hybrid system for North America, and then we're going to find it in the Rogue. But who knows what that will actually be.
Yeah, the next 5 to 10 years is going to be interesting for not only hybrid but also electric.
This is one for you. What do you like? What do you think about the new Murano?
Obviously I didn't get to drive it. It was just a first look.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind it. People in the comments were beating the heck out of that thing.
Really?
I don't really, in person, it doesn't look as bad. Well, it doesn't even look bad in pictures. I think people
Yeah,
are a little,
I
people
actually,
are a little too extreme, I think. But
I think it was fine. Let's move over to this one here because I do have a photo of it because I think it looks like a decent blend of that Kicks, which I think actually looks pretty good,
yep.
and the Aria, which I also think looks okay. Like I don't see anything wrong.
Yeah, it's much. I think personally, it's much better than the previous generation of Murano. The last generation of Murano, it was well done for in terms of powertrain as well as design. This is a much needed refresh, and I don't mind the looks of it. The DRLs down below, I don't mind because when they're off, they blend in nicely
Yeah,
with the grille itself.
it's kind of a cool look, and the headlights are really
The
slim.
headlights are now back on top.
Yeah.
I like it. The only thing I don't love about the front end design is how they integrated that bar that says Murano on the front.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just a little too much nose for me. I think if they moved up that grill just a tiny bit and maybe made that smaller or just deleted it,
They
it
went
might be a
for
little
they
bit better.
still stuck with this very organic, swoopy rear end, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I am
Shares
I
a lot with the Aria.
yeah, I kind of like the interior. The Aria's interior is roomy and comfortable, and this obviously is going in that same direction with the 2-screen dash setup and some of those touch buttons, etc. I think I'm okay with that though.
Yeah, the Murano, I'm glad that they finally brought it to the market. It's been well overdue, and that's everybody's complaint is like finally. It's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years past its due date. There is a reason behind that. Now,
Yeah.
can I explain that to them? There was no.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So when I went to the Nissan event, they had kind of a press briefing and gave us a lot of information. They let us know that the Aria was meant to be the Murano replacement. So they meant to have the Aria have the Murano name and be fully electric. But
Mhm.
they did some market research right before the release, or I guess not right before, but as they were approaching
Mhm.
thoughts of releasing the new Murano as fully electric, the market didn't show that the North American market was ready for a fully electric Murano. So they brought in a new model, the Aria, and pushed off the Murano a couple more years
Yeah.
and put it on life support. That is their words. They put the Murano on life support and did updates and refreshes and just kept it going for a couple more years until you have the new Murano. So it was well overdue. I don't mind the design. I'm excited to drive it, see how it
Mhm.
drives. I wish they would have just a little bit more horsepower.
Yeah.
Very underwhelming, but we'll have to
That's my
see.
only concern. Is it a little on the weak side horsepower-wise? The 9-speed, though, could be good for them. The 9-speed has been controversial. It's ZF's 9-speed. It's the same one that Chrysler and Honda and Jaguar Land Rover and a bunch of other companies have used on and off in vehicles. Um, but, it's not a CVT. And even though actual CVT problems are far less likely than people think,
Mhm.
people don't like them.
No, it'll be interesting to see how the 9-speed utilizes
Mhm.
such little horsepower. Because
Yeah.
sometimes CVTs with little horsepower are terrible.
Yeah, let's
But
move on to this one
we'll
here.
see.
Chris has asked, speaking about Hurricane, when will the Hurricane roll out to Grand Cherokee, Gladiator, Wrangler, etc.? This is actually a really good question because I was speaking to someone very, very off the record, and it sounded like we probably should be here by now, basically. The plan was, I think, initially, that they would end all V8 production and immediately swap every vehicle that used a V8 into this new inline-six Hurricane engine, because it does appear that Grand Cherokee and Grand Cherokee L were designed for it from the beginning. Gladiator and Wrangler, that might be tricky because I don't know if that engine bay is long enough. I think that they may have to make some changes.
Yeah, for
Admittedly,
sure.
Hurricane was designed to be a very short inline-six, so they tried to really make it as short as possible. So like in the Ram 1500s, it's not crazy long in the engine bay versus the previous generation Ram. It doesn't look, weird or jammed in there. But would it fit in Gladiator Wrangler? We don't know. The problem apparently seems to be that they could not get the production rate up to where they wanted it to be in time, it sounds like. And I know that that has hurt Ram 1500 sales because they weren't able to produce enough engines, at least at the beginning. And so there were some availability issues around that at the start of Ram 1500. I think they've been solved now. We'll see what that looks like in the next quarter of sales reporting. I know that a number of auto manufacturers in the US have seen some slowdown in sales. There have been some interest rate concerns. I think the market glut just got a bit too much. I think that people started producing too many really expensive models and trims of vehicles and really not focusing on the more affordable and volume side of the segments. Especially Ram 1500 has gotten really expensive. So I think that we'll see Grand Cherokee and Grand Cherokee L soon. Not for 2025 though, because we would already have been told that those changes. I think 2026 is more likely for the Hurricane engine. But stay tuned. Well, it's a good one. I don't know of any plans for us to get the updated G-Wagon or EV model. I'll have to check with Mercedes on that one. G-Wagon has not been a huge priority for us because they sell in such small numbers.
Yeah, market's not very
Yeah.
big.
But we're trying to work our way through some of those models interspersed here and there. Let's put it that way.
You missed this, you have to go back and watch that.
Oh yeah,
It's more of a
yeah.
this on the looks.
I think it's fugly. That's my word. So
That's your
that's
consensus.
that's my consensus. I want to see it in person, but I reserve the right to be revolted. And at the moment, I'm not sure my eyes are working properly. Like I think that I might have some scarring in there from seeing that front end.
Do we have any predictions if there's going to be any exclusive releases at the LA Auto Show, or is it all going to be things we've already had information
We
on?
will see the Ionic 9 for
Okay.
sure. They've announced that. We will see an Acura. I believe they already said that. There are a few other things. We know that the Tiguan for North America will be there. Porsche usually likes to show something there, but it's probably nothing major.
Another
Um,
$400,000 car.
yeah, we'll see the Vistic in greater detail there, but everybody already has seen it. The pictures are out. So it's not a huge amount of new information, I would say. Obviously, the final version of the passport's there, but I mean, heck, people have already driven it in Moab apparently
Yeah.
in camo, so not a big surprise there.
No, I don't believe so.
No,
From the what I heard while walking through Nissan headquarters, that's done. They're
stuck a
done with
fork in
it.
it. It's done.
Yeah.
And rationally so because unfortunately Titan never sold well,
Yeah.
and apparently it lost Nissan a lot of
Yeah.
money.
And Nissan is trying to they're not cutting corners, but they're trying to cut down costs wherever they can.
Yeah.
So there's no point in them bringing back all new Titan, or even there's no reason to bring back the Titan if it wasn't selling well in the first place. It's probably not going to sell
Right.
that well now, and the technology might not be there to even compete with what's on the market right now. So we'll just have, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe later down the road when they start getting back on their feet a little bit more, but I highly doubt it.
It does, yeah, it doesn't seem rational. Even Toyota has more or less admitted that Tundra is not exactly profitable, and you can bet with this latest recall, they're losing a lot of money on Tundra. And they're a much bigger car company than Nissan. So if Toyota has troubles really chipping into the North American market, which they have, I mean, Tundra sales are 1/3 of Ram sales, so that's unlikely.
Yeah.
We have not gotten an early look at the Ioniq 9, but we will be next week. Can't talk about it though, so stay tuned. We'll be able to talk about it around the LA Auto Show. I think it's around that date. Volkswagen Tiguan we will see shortly before the LA Auto Show. I know a few people have seen it already though.
Let's see what else we got. No early glimpse of the Ioniq 9, as we just stated. Let's see here. Let's go back up and see. Have the shift quality
That's a
issues
good
of the
one.
ZF9 been improved?
No, because it's not a thing that can be improved. Let's put it that way. It just is the way that it is. It's sort of like asking if a DCT will ever have, without a torque converter, will ever have better stop and go performance. It can't, just due to its intrinsic design. For those that aren't aware of how ZF's 9-speed functions, it has a very unique clutch design. So most automatic transmissions have clutches or bands, and they're just regular friction clutches like in a manual transmission. So they're swimming in a fluid bath. Basically, you can slip the clutch and engage the gear, but also you have the torque converter. You can engage the gear while there is some level of power flowing through the transmission. So you can, if the transmission, you want to shred it to pieces, you could actually have full power going through the transmission and still shift while you're in motion. That cannot happen in 2-gear shifts in the ZF 9-speed automatic because it uses a positive engagement tooth mechanism, tooth clutch. So basically the same kind of thing that you have in a transfer case, going from 4 high to 4 low. So the transmission has to basically stop power flowing through, match the speed of the input and output shafts on these, and then just sort of jam the teeth together, and then it can continue. That's a really tricky process, and so I'm actually surprised that the ZF transmission is as smooth as it is, because I would not have considered that design to be smooth enough in a way. So I doubt that it will ever get better. It would require a complete redesign without those clutch sets. But if they did that, then the transmission would be physically larger and it would be heavier and all of that, which is why the Honda 10-speed automatic, for instance, it does have a really solid ratio spread still, but it's bigger and heavier, etc., and that makes it more difficult to package, especially in small vehicles.
Have we heard anything about a QX50 or QX55 refresh redesign coming in the future?
I have, but they haven't been specific. Infiniti said it's coming. That's all we know.
Yeah, I can't really speak on specifics, but I was at the Nissan headquarters, and there are things on the horizon, but I can't say exactly what they are. Cannot confirm or deny it's the QX50 or QX55. So Nissan's got some pretty big things coming along the timeline, and they shared a lot with us in terms of information on that. I think they're a year or two behind in my personal look. We'll see how it executes, because their plan right now, they are trying to gain ground, and if they can pull that off, then great. I think they're going to be in a good spot here in a couple of years. especially with the Infiniti brand as well. We'll see, though. We'll see.
Yeah, what Infiniti turns into, that'll be kind of interesting because they keep vacillating between, we're going to be a premium Nissan thing. Their exact phrase was Nissan Plus, which, kind of frightening actually. And then they're like, well, never mind. We're committed to QX80 and it's the most expensive and most luxurious model we've ever had, etc. That's kind of tricky.
This is definitely a question for you. We're going to get a Tesla adapter for Toyota EV and PHEV.
We should be getting the Tesla adapter for the EVs because Toyota has committed to the new connector. But for plug-in hybrids, it's unlikely because Toyota doesn't do any plug-in hybrid DC fast charging. So eventually, it seems like every major manufacturer, with I think just one exception, has agreed to the J3400 connector for everything, for EVs, plug-in hybrids, etc. But whether or not there will be adapters, that's a different question. Some car companies out there have said that they're never going to be producing an official Tesla tap-style adapter for AC charging, which would include plug-in hybrids. And some have said, maybe it'll happen. We don't know. That's a different question.
As we wait for some more questions to come in, what has been the highlight so far of 2024 in terms of releases, technology? What's something that stands out in your brain when I ask you that question?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that one.
Now, sometimes when you go to so many events and are just bombarded with all this information, sometimes it just all kind of just muddles down into nothing land.
Yeah, it's been a busy year for launches, etc. We'll see how 2025 goes if it matches this cadence of lots of releases, because a lot of what we've driven recently is not going to be on sale in volume. They may be on sale before the end of the year, but they're not going to be really in stock at dealers for a while until the end of the year. So we'll see how that goes.
Thoughts on the new Explorer / Aviator?
I kind of wish that the Aviator and Explorer was. I wish it was a bit more. They'd done more with it in a way. I think that it was a good, solid improvement, but I think if it was that improvement a year ago or 2 years ago, that would have been better, and then we would be on track for a newer model. On the other hand, though, it is still relatively unique that it's a rear-wheel drive entry in that segment. The change that I would have wanted in Explorer would have been more towing capacity because it's a little low.
Yeah, I just had an Explorer fairly recently, and it's a lot of fun to drive. I don't think I would personally buy one. I don't think it's like you said, it hasn't changed a whole lot. But it's still a great driving vehicle, and the rear-wheel drive bias is awesome, and it's awesome that is standard now. It's no longer an option; it's standard.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, is not found.
Let's go with the super chat there. San Diego Cruiser is asking us Ford Lightning versus Silverado RST. This is a tricky one because the Silverado, that is some really expensive, Ultium family thing there. I love the practicality of that midgate. I don't know if you checked that out. The whole fold down rear window thing where you fold down the rear seats, fold down the midgate, and then you can.
I love that part of your video when you're climbing in and out of it and doing all
the. You can actually do it really quick if you want to. Also, totally cool. Less cool is the price tag. That's a big bummer because $100,000. I just have troubles justifying that. You do get more range than in the Lightning. You get that mid-gate functionality, but you lose CarPlay, which is a bit of a bummer. And there don't seem to be as many deals going. You are going to get the Sidewinder mode, the four-wheel steering is kind of cool, but none of your existing Silverado accessories are going to fit on it. So that's the big advantage with Lightning, is that anything that bolts on to a regular F-150, from rock rails or steps or whatever you want to stick on the bed, in the bed, whatever, it's all going to fit. And in Silverado, everything is going to have to get redesigned for that.
Yeah, the price tag's a huge part. I have not gotten hands-on or seen it in person, the Chevy Silverado. I have had hands-on with the Ford Lightning, and it's really hard to hate when it's just an F-150 with electrification, because the F-150 is such a fantastic tried and true platform. And then when you add electrification, it's hard to mess it up. Now, there's downfalls to both sides, so it's really up to personal opinion, but I think I think the Ford Lightning would probably be my pick, especially price taken into
Price
account.
tag wise, yeah, because you could probably get you could snag 2 Ford Lightnings for the price of one Silverado RST, especially right now with the glut of Lightning inventory that they have and the deals. Your Ryan's over here asking, should they have called it an Avalanche or an EV Lanch? I think that actually would have been pretty funny. I asked that question at some point, and they basically implied that they thought there was no brand equity in Avalanche, which I think is insane. I think that there is. I know a lot of people that have clung on to their super duper crazy rough Avalanches because they were cool and they were interesting. So I think they should have. I think they should have gone that way.
They were cool when they were released. They got weird and uncool, and now they're cool again. I think they're awesome.
Yeah,
they're odd,
I think they're
but
cool.
They're awesome. But that would have been. I'm a market expert.
Mm-hmm.
I think the EV Lanch would be a
Yeah.
great name. So Ryan, I'm with you on that.
I would say to this question, lots of vehicles do rack up inventory and production gets paused this time of year because we're moving over to a next production year. Obviously, for Lightning, it's because inventory was being racked up. But also keep in mind that Stellantis and Toyota, et cetera, lots of car companies have actually also paused production at this point in time. Unfortunate pausing can also happen at all sorts of times. Unfortunate pausing, for instance, includes the Grand Highlander, which apparently is still not being produced. Production was supposed to restart in October, and it does not appear that production has actually restarted. I have not been able to find any evidence to the contrary, at least. Lower cost Polestar. I would say probably not. Polestar has said that they're not trying to chase Tesla down the mainstream rabbit hole. They're not trying to become a mainstream car company. So I would not be surprised if there was something below, price-wise, below a Polestar 3 in the future. Admittedly, Polestar 4 actually will be a little bit less expensive, but I'm going to go with probably not. It's always possible they could build something on the same platform that the EX30, a number of other Geelys, and of course the Smart EV that Mercedes has. They're all built on that same platform. They are going to be moving production for some models to Europe. Of course, Polestar 4 has been going to be produced in South Korea, so that way they're not having a problem with the tariffs. But yeah, we don't know how that's going to go. The tariff situation is very, very uncertain, especially right now, making it very difficult for car companies to plan. There had been some initial thought that Polestar would be able to escape the tariff situation by building things in the US and shipping them back to China. That was the EV plan. And initially that was allowed. So for every car you sold in China that was built in the US, you could bring one the other direction. But the trade war that's been, brewing between China and the US has made that untenable, it seems.
Why don't automakers allow journalists or potential buyers to do real-world validation of vehicles to work out the kinks before the vehicle is released?
Yeah, I mean, they do to some extent. So I would say, generally speaking, car companies do lots of focus groups. They do, it's a very interesting process. And they do focus groups with customers, whether those are competitive customers that currently own competitive vehicles that they're interested in conquesting. They will also do focus groups and research on their existing customer base because they don't want to alienate them either. And they will interview and do things under NDA with journalists. I have done some of those myself, and so I can't talk specifically about them. But I can say that there is a lot of work around that. And what do you think of this? What do you think of that? But some car companies' hubris and just general internal design directions just factor into this. Then it's a freight train that cannot be stopped, or they honestly, to their core, believe that this is a good way to do it. So Volkswagen with the window switches, they honestly believe that's the way to go. Volvo picked it up on EX90, and I think it's ridiculous, the lack of window switches. I'd rather have window switches in the center console than limit the number of switches in the car on the doors. Lyric sound system, that's an odd one because I didn't pay too much attention to it at first, but then after I heard people's comments on it, and then I went back in with that ear, I was like, now I see. Now
No,
I
what was
see.
wrong with it?
It sounds kind of flat and strange is probably the best way to describe it.
But that's a premium sound system, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or was that just
Yeah, it's the AKG audio system, and but it does sound unusual in the lyric. Ride and handling, I mean, that's just their choice for tuning the vehicle, and not everybody has the same tastes, so I can't fault them necessarily for that.
Yes, let's see here. We got this comment. Hopefully, you were doing hands-free while driving. But it's funny to be hearing you guys mention the 9-speed while driving in my 120,000 mile 2015 200C all-wheel drive.
Yep. I mean, every transmission is going to get a little worse shifting with age. So
keep driving that thing until it stops moving. Just keep driving it. That's the best vehicle to have, is one that just keeps on going.
So. Yeah, they're already paid for. Let's move on here. RAV4 hybrid versus CX50 hybrid. This is a good one. We actually kind of mentioned this one in our podcast. It's coming up soon. Can Mazda compete with Toyota's long-term reliability? Well, that's a tricky question in a way, because it depends on what portion of the vehicle you're thinking of when it comes to reliability. RAV4 and CX50 share the exact same hybrid system. Same horsepower numbers, same engine, same transmission, same rear electric motor. Literally everything from the RAV4 hybrid was lifted and dropped into the CX50 hybrid. The video on that's coming up soon because I've already driven it. And, in a way, it's kind of the best of both worlds. If you love the style of the Mazda, but you want RAV4 hybrid reliability, it actually should basically be that blend. Even the battery was borrowed out of the RAV4. They just borrowed the same nickel metal hydride battery, jammed it under the rear seats in the CX50. Now, unfortunately, there are compromises because CX50 wasn't designed for that hybrid system from the beginning, which blows my mind since they announced that it would have a hybrid at the beginning. Whatever. And so lots of structural changes had to happen in the CX50 in order to accommodate the Toyota hybrid system. New front suspension, new engine cradle, tweaked rear suspension, a bunch of other stuffs, new rear seats, etc. So it does lose practicality over the regular CX50. You lose some legroom, some headroom, you lose some ground clearance, and dimensions get adjusted here and there. So, definitely keep that in mind. And, CX50 has never been the best handling entry in the segment, and the CX50 hybrid's a 4,008 pound hybrid. So, can't talk about how it drives, but you can connect the dots.
4,008 pounds or 4,800?
4,008. So 4,008 pounds. Yeah, just over 4,000. Yeah.
Gotcha. Got a question, thoughts on reliability and quality of Infiniti QX80? Looking at a used 2019.
I will say that Infiniti's engine and transmission in that model have been fairly reliable for the 2019s, the V8, etc. Electrical and battery issues, I haven't heard too much about those. The awkward thing with any used car and worrying about reliability in a way is that you're going to probably end up Googling and then end up in a forum, rabbit hole. And forums are where problems collect. So it's not necessarily representative of the whole of the total,
masses,
but you can get an idea of what problems there can be. Relative frequency of the problem, bad way to look at that.
You do enough research on any vehicle, there's problems for every single vehicle. So just take it with a grain of salt, especially if you do find yourself on forums, because I've been down that road before, and it's a scary place because you start second guessing all of your decisions in life.
Right.
Just do your due diligence, and you will find the vehicle for you for sure.
The average car buyer doesn't go to a forum to let everybody know that their car hasn't had a problem.
Right. So, you only see the worst of the worst.
And so at that point, though, for 2019, you should be able to, for instance, look at consumer reports, etc. I have problems with consumer reports data, mind you. That's a whole separate conversation. But you should still be able to get a general idea of comparisons based on consumer feedback, especially for 2019. You should be able to find some data on that.
Now, I don't think this is worth talking about that much because it's...
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that last week. You should check out the pod there. But I'm just not, I don't know. I'm not, what would you, here's a thought for you.
10 years.
I just don't understand the rationale behind wanting to own a cyber cab. Would you send your car out to Uber without you, knowing what people do in Ubers and taxis, etc.?
Or those Waymos that are floating around
Hmm.
California. No,
Yeah, like you
no
go to
way.
work and you're having a great day at work, and you're like, things are fabulous. I send my car out to do Ubering, and it picks up a whole bunch of frat boys or sorority girls, and they're all hungover and sick from last night, and they barf in the back seat. Your car comes to pick you up from work, and now you've got
Right.
last night's vomit in your car. Great.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic day. I'm not sure about that. I am far more interested in the autonomous van stuff they have, like a shuttle buses or stuff
Yeah.
like airports or whatever. That could be kind of cool. Also, the one area, but this is a very limited market for like cybercab. Like if you weren't going to rent it out and you just wanted a fully autonomous car because you have a medical problem and you can't drive yourself, or you're old and you shouldn't be driving, or you need to send your 14-year-old somewhere safely and the car can get them there and it's locked, etc. Like, you could take your kids could take themselves to soccer practice or something like
Yeah.
that. That seems logical. If you have a vision problem, if you're blind or you're epileptic or something like that and you can't drive, that would be a great way that you could still get to work and have independence that you can't have now. But that's not seemingly how they're billing it.
I've heard bad reviews on Mazdas. My mechanic says he often is replacing Mazda transmissions at 150,000 miles. Love the look, but may go with Toyota to avoid headaches down the road.
Yeah, same exact
Yeah.
transmission as the Toyota. So, if you have a 150,000 mile replacement in your Mazda, it's going to be the same in the Toyota because it's the same transmission. On the other hand, actually replacing a transmission at 150,000 miles,
Pretty normal.
it's not that uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work at a Mazda dealership, and that was somewhat commonplace. Transmission
Mhm.
replacements was fairly common, but 150,000 miles without any major issues
Mhm.
is a huge achievement,
Yeah.
especially now. I mean, it's always been an achievement to get past that 100,000 mile mark. Obviously, everybody wants to get 200,000 or used to
Yeah.
now. It's kind of changed a little bit as turnover seems to be greater. But 150,000 miles, a transmission is a small price to pay if you get
Mhm.
150K out of a vehicle. I mean,
And I will
that's
say some of it depends on your kind of driving.
yeah.
Like
People are hard on cars.
if you're driving mostly highway miles and you have to replace your transmission at 150, that's bad. If you're doing lots of city driving and 150 is all you get out of it, that's not as bad, actually. And if you're doing a lot of towing, hauling, kind of work in a light duty truck, in a half-ton truck, replacing your transmission before 100,000 miles is actually not that uncommon as well. Kind of regardless of the truck or vehicle you're looking at. If we're looking at a Mercedes, full-size van, or a Nissan full-size van, or a Toyota Tundra truck in commercial use, a lot of those trucks end up having their transmissions replaced sooner than you might imagine.
This comment kind of disappointed in Honda for not making an Accord all hybrid like the
Mm,
Camry and barely getting around to offering a Civic hybrid while killing the insight and clarity.
yeah, I would say this is an interesting question. Honda's a very small car company, and this is the big thing I would remind people of. And a point that I hadn't actually thought of myself. So I remember recently, actually, I was at an event. It was not a Honda event; it was a Hyundai event of all things. And one of the engineers, not from Hyundai North America, but from Hyundai Korea, actually made a really salient point with Honda specifically, because there was a conversation around Honda. What's Honda doing? Why are they doing this? Why are they not doing that? And the engineer at a competitor basically said, well, my job is not to defend my competitor, obviously, but you need to understand Honda's a very small car company. And this is definitely true. Like, you take a look at global sales for Honda, Honda is not as big as Hyundai or Kia, especially Toyota. They're actually quite a bit smaller than a lot of people think. The US is by far their biggest market. Their sales in Europe are okay, but they're not extraordinary. They're one of the smaller car companies in Japan. Toyota really dominates the domestic market there and all the different things that Toyota owns, etc. So when we're looking at the size of the car company and all the demands on that car company and the areas that Honda's trying to compete in, they're trying to have a luxury brand, they're trying to have a pickup truck and here and there. something has to give, and a lot of what does seem to be giving at Honda is the variation in engines and some production capacity. They've been trying to improve production capacity, but that's a lot of R&D investment and production capacity investment without the scale globally that Toyota can pull upon for their program. So I would say if we're looking at this rationally, structurally, Honda is actually more aggressive at this, given their size, than Ford or General Motors, even though Ford or General Motors would be much more capable of making that change than Honda, because they have the resources for that. They're a much bigger company. They could employ and direct resources around where they need to go. And Honda, is working on their electrification, their own internal electrification program. But this is also kind of why we see partnerships going on with Honda. They've been a car company with a lot of internal pride and a lot of, trying to make things themselves. They try and design their own transmissions. Sometimes that doesn't go well. Um, they design their own engines. They very rarely, but occasionally do partner out. But it's not the kind of thing where Honda's going to run to Toyota and license their hybrid system. That would be unimaginable, really, for Honda.
Mhm. Is Nissan or Infiniti to blame for killing off the Q50? They said it was killed off due to
Mhm.
poor sales, but vehicle last redesign was 2014 and had glaring issues. Interior was very outdated.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Q50s, the writing was on the wall already. That segment is a really tough one. Infiniti and Nissan would have had to spend a considerable amount of money redesigning the platform, especially redesigning the engines and
Yeah.
and emissions testing for a vehicle that doesn't share anything directly with too many other vehicles. Z is the closest one, and so that would be just a tough sell given the sales volume. There's a reason IS sells poorly as well. I mean, it's really really old, doesn't sell well. Um, Only companies like the Germans that have large sales outside the US market to help make that rationally work seem to really be still okay with that segment. And Genesis, which is only doing it because they want to, they think of it as it's another pride thing. So they want to compete in every segment because they have the money. But there's no way Genesis is making any money on anything. And Hyundai has the money to burn. Just Nissan doesn't.
One thing I can say is that Nissan did say they will never not have a sports car. The
Hmm.
GTR is gone. The Q50 might be gone as well, but the Z will be around
Hmm.
indefinitely. That was from the higher ups from Nissan. That will always be around. That's what they say.
Yeah.
We will see. Now, they did also say that that doesn't mean that it's always going to be internal combustion. It could go electric and keep the
Hmm.
Z name. We'll just have to see what that means in the near
Hmm.
future. But yeah, sedans are a hard sell, and if it's not making money, then like if you were just selling something yourself and you weren't making money, why keep doing it? You're just
Yeah.
burning a hole in your pocket. So I don't blame them, but it sucks. I love the Q50.
Hmm.
Q60 was probably my favorite, but
Yeah.
especially the red sports.
Hmm. This is actually good questions. The poor efficiency of serial hybrids like Nissans and Hondas due to energy conversion losses or because of electric motor, etc. So the core loss there is the generation. So it's mechanical to electrical conversion and then back. The biggest loss, of course, is the generation side. So and at every point you're losing something. Electric motors are not 100% efficient, but they're very efficient. Um, AC to AC conversion can also be very efficient. So in this process, generally speaking, to control everything, they're generating AC power, they're rectifying it. There's a high voltage DC bus, there's a battery as a ballast essentially, and then over to the electric motor that's driving the vehicle forward. And yes, there are losses in there, but they're not extreme. Most of it happens at the generation site, which is why most other hybrids out there try and avoid that by having a mechanical path for the energy. So in the case of Hondas, there's a clutch that it can engage, and then it will directly drive the wheels through a fixed gear. In Toyota's hybrid system, they really have spent most of their focus on every generation iteration of the Toyota hybrid system, hybrid synergy drive. They try and shuttle as much power along the mechanical connection as possible because the losses on the electrical side can be 20% maybe, depending on the design and the era, etc. but the mechanical losses are going to be considerably lower. So with the Toyota system, you may lose 20% through that electrical path, but maybe only 20% of the power is going that way. So you're losing a lot less than you would in a true serial hybrid in a way.
Corolla Cross Hybrid versus RAV4 Hybrid for a family of 3.
I mean, I think the RAV4 Hybrid's better looking.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
No, price-wise.
Yeah, but price-wise, they're very close. Is the other problem, I think. Corolla Cross Hybrid is the more expensive trim of Corolla Cross, and RAV4 Hybrid is about price parity. It's a little bit more expensive than RAV4, but the fuel economy is also better in RAV4 Hybrid than Corolla Cross Hybrid. So I think that RAV4 Hybrid's the better buy, unless financially it really is tight affordability wise. Affordability is always important, but if you do have the ability to afford the two, I would go with RAV4. You're going to get the bigger, better handling vehicle with the latest tech in it, the recent refresh, and better fuel economy.
Bigger engine equals RAV4 hybrid wins.
Oh,
as Ryan says.
Of course, Ryan says that. Let's move on. I think there was a question up here that was interesting here.
Did I miss one?
Oh, here we go. The 2025 RAV4 is released on the market. The one thing I will say is that the rumor mill is saying currently that we won't have a 2025 refreshed RAV4, that it will be a 2026. That's what I've been hearing lately. I don't know if you've heard anything different lately.
I have not.
But most likely the 2025 will be just a minor increment in price. If we were going to get a 2025 refresh, we would basically already know now. There would already have been invites, we would have seen it, etc. So most likely that's what we're going to get there. Drew is disagreeing, saying that the G35 was a hot seller before it got redesigned into the Q50.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I think it was a long time ago. I will say the adaptive steer was controversial. I don't know how much that really affected sales, other than styling and the industry moving on. Back in the G35 era, sedans were still selling relatively well, and we didn't have the smorgasbord of SUV options.
Mm-hmm. I do like the G. It drives like a truck. It's hard to say. Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, the whole entire car market is different from when the G35 was around.
I kind of wish that the FX would come back.
Really?
In a way,
that was an odd vehicle.
In a way, because
it was blind spots.
It was ahead of its time in a way, because we now are seeing the rise of the coupe crossover in the luxury segment, and I would argue that that is what has killed G35. It's not necessarily the G itself, because when we take a look at sales of even the established players, 3 Series, C-Class, etc., they're dramatically down over the last 10 years even. Over 30 years, I mean, astronomically down over 30 years ago. And a lot of that is the rise of the crossovers in those manufacturers' lineups, and also the coupe crossovers, which are kind of a funky, weird thing. But we have X4 now and X6. And when you really look at them, X6 sort of has a very similar profile to 5 Series. It's just the higher riding thing with the higher hit point, better road visibility, more practical cargo area, etc. I was very shocked to hear from one of our local Mercedes dealers here in the Bay Area that, at least for them, the GLE Coupe specifically is outselling E-Class. GLE's been outselling E-Class for a while, but for the Coupe to be outselling E-Class, I was surprised.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, you get a bigger vehicle.
Yeah.
Not by much, but you get a bigger vehicle.
Maggie is asking about the thoughts of Nissan. This is an interesting one. I don't believe that Nissan, I don't believe that any of the major car companies are in existential trouble.
It would take a lot.
It will take a lot, right? What are they going to become? How do they correct the course? That is more of the question. And Nissan's future, I will say, is more uncertain. Not are they going to exist, but what will Nissan do or change or become? How will they shrink their product line or their footprint to accommodate the reality, that's what we don't know. I blame some of this on the Japanese government orchestrating the Mitsubishi purchase, because that didn't exactly go well with Nissan. It didn't sound like Nissan was really that interested. They got kind of made to be interested in Mitsubishi. And the Nissan Renault alliance was definitely Carlos Ghosn's thing. So he was the one that was really driving that. But now that he is in Lebanon trying to fight extradition, well, they don't have an extradition treaty, but now that he can never leave Lebanon because he will be extradited to Japan and put in jail, that alliance has basically withered, and there's no one else seemingly to partner with Nissan in, again, the world that we were talking about, which is really expensive to develop new products, etc. So I personally have this suspicion that Nissan's future is in condensing their product line, obviously ditching some sedans. You know, they're gonna have to reduce the number of sedans they have, reduce complexity, become more of a leaner operation. But I think they'll be fine. Infiniti probably has a less certain future than the core of Nissan. And if Nissan turns into basically Buick, that could be fine. It could be less expensive. So
Yeah.
that's
If anybody knows Nissan's in trouble, it's Nissan.
yeah,
And they know well, and they know how they're going to fix it, or at least they think they're going to fix it. So the next 5 years is going to be huge for Nissan as a company.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah, definitely. And also electrifying models is going to keep them in
Yeah.
talk with other vehicles. So
Yeah.
electrification and also slimming down that product line is going to help.
And this kind of goes with Joshua's question here, I would say. Can you explain the VW is in trouble situation? Before I pontificate, let me question you, Nick, as the young person. What is your impression of Volkswagen? Like when someone says Volkswagen for a new car, what's your first thought?
Oh wow, that's tough. I have a lot in my head.
Okay, let's unpack. What do you think of their design? Do they look good?
I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention, to be completely fair and honest
Really?
with you guys. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to Volkswagen.
That's bad for Volkswagen.
But
I think VWs look good. I like the sharp lines.
I don't hate them. I have noticed that. So, let me preface with saying, growing up, my brother had a Volkswagen Jetta that leaked oil like crazy. It was like a late '90s Volkswagen Jetta. That's the Volkswagen I knew until I became a young adult, teen, whatever you want to call it. And once I'd say probably 2005 and up, it just seemed like the interiors were just a tiny bit cheap. And it's kind of hard because before I even had any of the knowledge I have now, I would look in there and go, well, this is also the same company that makes Audi. How is this interior that much different? But that's also me being not knowledgeable on the car market and how things work. And Volkswagen now, though, is, I don't know.
Let's go over their lineup together.
Let's do it.
So, Volkswagen Atlas. Does that look good or not?
I don't mind it. My mom
I believe they're currently their best sellers, I recall, or close to it.
My mom actually almost bought an Atlas. I didn't necessarily love the way it drove. I liked the way
nothing in that segment's exciting.
No
driving, but I think it looks
good.
There
were cars that drove better. That's my whole point.
Like I like the sharp lines. The LCDs are cool. The fake wood's kind of nice.
The other version of it, the Cross
Sport.
Is it Cross
Atlas
Sport?
Cross Sport? Yes, Atlas Cross Sport.
Sorry, I was like
Tiguan's kind of cool. I mean, it's a very similar kind of thing. Taos. I like the look of them all. But I will say,
you know what I think of when I think of Volkswagen? Rental car.
Oh, really? Ouch.
Yeah, I know. That's
ouch. I mean, in Europe, yes, but in the US, not really.
I know. That's a harsh thing to say. I'm sorry.
I will say I don't understand why America doesn't like Volkswagen, because I will say this whole VW's in trouble situation, it's an America thing, and it's not new. It's been decades. Volkswagen sales today are appreciably similar or below what they were 20 years ago. Yet, when we look at like Kia sales over this time frame, I mean, they are through the roof. So obviously Kia and Hyundai have done something that Volkswagen just somehow cannot do in North America. And I don't actually get why. Internationally, their sales are generally fine. And they're a huge, huge car company. They have the resources to do this. And I will also argue that Volkswagen always seems to be doing everything that America wants. America's like, oh, we deserve discount Audi. So they had an era where everything was a discount Audi, and the interiors are fantastic. Passats had real wood trim. They were related to the Audi lineup.
There was a Phaeton.
Yeah, there was a Phaeton. I mean, they did it.
Yeah.
They were like, yep, here it is. There was a Tig, the Touareg, etc. And then
V10 Volkswagen,
yeah,
W8s,
nobody bought them.
No.
And then there was the era where they were like, well, America wants cheap cars. So they were like, okay, well, here is a Jetta and a Passat that's cheap and it's built in America and it's just for America. And then nobody liked that either. So they didn't like the expensive Jetta. They didn't like the cheap Jetta. Like, so what Jetta do you want? Maybe the answer is no Jetta, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, this comment definitely sparked some interest in the comments section.
Yeah.
There has been a revolving reel of comments. So
yeah, I just don't understand. It's this weird. So it's like, stop blanking out the auto hold button. Would that fix it? I don't know if that's going to fix the problem. Is that going to get people to go into the interior? To Matthew's point, I would say that's what customers claimed they wanted. The ID Buzz, the wrong vehicle at the wrong time. I would say I would actually disagree, because the whole thing was we want affordable EVs. That was the whole claim from a certain segment of America. And Volkswagen was probably the best positioned auto manufacturer to try that. They actually even built a factory line in their factory in Chattanooga to build these things here and get the tax credit, and that didn't work. So it's so weird, such a weird situation. But none of the things they've tried have worked, and so maybe it's just the German name.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, also the whole diesel didn't help. That didn't help the situation.
Ryan doesn't make a bad point here. The most interesting VW products are always coming soon. But, the coming soon products that they've had, I don't know if that would fix the problem. Like ID Buzz, it's cool. They're not going to sell 200,000 of those a year. There's just no way. Maybe they could sell 100,000 ID4s in some future alternate universe where it became the $25,000 EV. It's not the world we live in. But, that's a problem.
Let's see what Tony's saying right there. I really love my 88 Audi 80, 95 Jetta GLX VR6. I mean, you're talking about, those are passion projects. Those are people's still sought after products. So it's like, I think Volkswagen, in my eyes, Volkswagen was cheap but great. And then they went with like discount Audi, which was awesome, but also detrimental in terms of repairs and reliability. And then now it's more of trying to go mass production, which cars are more expensive now. They need to sell more cars to make money. And so it's kind of just finding this balancing act between those two things that I said before, where I don't know if Volkswagen is executing that as well as other companies. So it's I don't know, it's a tough market. There's a lot of competition too. So it's
I mean, I don't mean to sound like I'm on VW's PR team, because apparently VW's PR team doesn't like us at the moment. God knows why, but apparently we're on their naughty list at the moment.
This isn't helping.
We never get invites from Volkswagen if they're listening. But at any rate, but no, like I actually honestly think that Volkswagen is theoretically doing everything right, because they're doing everything that customers keep telling them they want, and it just doesn't seem to move the needle. And I don't understand why. Maybe it's the size of their dealer network or something that could be fixed. I just don't know.
I will say to you guys watching is I have not been behind the wheel of a Volkswagen in a very long time. I haven't had them in the press fleet. I haven't personally been behind the wheel of a Volkswagen in a very long time. So just a little point to be made, just so you guys understand where I'm coming from.
I will say that part of this, Drew, I would agree with. Their warranty has definitely led to people putting more trust back in Hyundai and Kia, the long standard powertrain warranty especially. But, I don't think that Volkswagen styling is a problem. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I think that the Atlas is one of the better looking entries in its segment. And the only one of those vehicles that I think is a little bit dowdy looking, Jetta hung on a little too long, but now it's fresh again. When that launched, I think it actually was good too. And also is cheap. The only one that I think is maybe a little funny looking, maybe is the ID4. That's about it. I think everything else they have is actually really quite good looking.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint what the issue is.
And
they're not terribly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
They're nice looking on the outside. The interiors aren't the worst on the market.
Mm-hmm.
The powertrains aren't bad.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know. It's a tough call.
I mean, there are little things here and there, but I don't know if this is a deal breaker for people because, like, VW adding backlighting to the touch controls, so to see them in the dark. Yeah, that was a funky one, but you know what? Their sales weren't great before they did that, and they aren't great when they added it back in. So like, I don't know. Companies do stupid things and it doesn't affect their sales. Companies do other things that affect their sales in a positive way. It's so unclear, um, you know, what actually will get people to go back into that dealership and I don't know, be interested in a Volkswagen because you have to get someone if you're just the average car shopper that and no offense to the average car shopper, this is how everybody shops for at least one thing in their life where you're like, I don't care what that thing is, I just need the thing to get me from A to B. So if you're like that for clothes or cars or electronics or whatever, and you don't care what brand it is, you just need the thing to do the thing, right? You have and if that's cars for you, then what gets you to know that they exist?
I saw someone said they don't push the envelope. I don't know if that would do it.
I don't know if that would do it either. I mean, Golf R is lovely. Um, GTI has always been, the solid longest running hot hatch in America. You know,
All right, let's start.
Passat's big. I don't know.
Let's ask some questions outside of Volkswagen. I do want to ask this comment or something. So great channel. Thank you so much. Always my go-to for car reviews. Just add a little segment about the car stereos. Question for you as the viewer. What do you want us to, how do you want us to review it? Because it's kind of a hard one to test because the audio I'm hearing in my ears is not translated through a camera, through processing, through video. So how would you want us to test that? Because I can give like a score, but that doesn't give you any sense. I can talk about a wattage. I can talk about speaker setup. I can talk about tuning.
And we could do.
It's hard to translate through camera. So
Yeah.
I guess a little insight from the viewer would be great. So if you have any opinions or wants, let us know in the comments.
We have thought about doing like audio analysis stuff, but that gets actually quite expensive and difficult to do in a thoughtful and useful manner in a way. That's kind of tricky. I will say, thanks for that. Car Confections does play audio in every video review, but that just does not come across
No.
well. I mean, you're not going to hear any difference in that through the microphone in the car and how that actually feels in there. I think it's lovely that they do it. It's good for them for doing it, but like that doesn't help me know what the audio quality is like any differently than them talking about it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we can stick with giving just our personal opinion because I have found I did that for a few videos, but it's kind of hard to elaborate outside of just a couple of words.
Yeah.
To just say like it sounds flat on the mids or the highs or the lows, or the lows are too lows or too high.
Yeah.
So if you have any recommendations on how we could actively give you a representation of what the speaker system, because that is an important piece of buying, and that's I talked to Alex about that when I first started, is how could we review an audio system? Because for me that is one of the that's crazy to say, but it's the most important thing in a car. Well, one of Apple CarPlay and the speaker system. Everything else is nothing I can change, right? The powertrain, I can't actively add more horsepower from the dealership or add more cylinders, but I can choose a premium audio system or a vehicle that doesn't or does have Apple CarPlay. So yeah, you're gonna have to let us know how you want us to do that. Or the playing on the video, it doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, it's I mean it's a fun thing. It's it's a shtick. I hate to maybe just that's not fair. I love the people at Car Confections, so it's like, obviously we all are together all the time. But it does not add much actual review, there's no there, that's what I would say. Exactly. And I would say, audio definitely tends to be very personality driven. You can do, and there's some outlets that do this where you can actually do an actual audio analysis of it. You can input certain frequencies. You can see how well the system actually replicates those frequencies in relation to one another, etc. That's a more complicated, more in-depth thing that I think would be better done by other people, to be honest. Like, I don't know if that's our thing. and if we could do justice to that kind of analysis, and that I know other people do that, so that would be
I try to
a
mention when
thing.
I find an exceptional sound system.
Hmm.
One thing to point out if you aren't aware is more speakers does not always mean better.
Hmm.
It's all
Exactly.
about
Yeah.
tuning, cabin space, how the speakers are placed, where they're placed.
Hmm.
So if you are just looking at the stats of, or I guess like the specs of a vehicle, just because one has 10 and one has 27 doesn't mean that 27 is necessarily 17 speakers
Right.
than 10.
Yeah.
So just take that with a grain of salt when you are looking at specs of a vehicle, that more speakers does not always mean more better.
Yeah. Drew's asking about the Cadillac Optic. I'm guessing it's going to be early next year because it's supposed to be on sale around December, but there are no drive programs that late in the year. So I'm guessing it'll be probably a January thing. And Car Dude, yep, I actually this is one Savage Geese does one of the ones I'm talking about where they in some of their vehicles, they don't do it all the time, but in some of their vehicles they do go really in depth and they are actually looking at frequency response of the sound system. And that's where, if they're doing it well, why would we replicate that in a way?
Mhm.
This is an interesting one, the Stellantis situation. You guys would have to let us know what about the Stellantis situation are you asking about? Because this comes in, there are two sides of this in a way. There is the sales slide and the fact that they are having, production pauses and employees possibly furloughed. They are definitely doing plant shutdowns. There's that whole thing. There are also some early retirement packages seemingly being offered here and there. On the other hand, we don't know their complete fiscal year returns though. But last year, even though sales had slid last year, they were the second most profitable car company in the world. They had one of the highest profit margins, significantly higher profit margins than every of their mainstream competitors, higher than Toyota, and they have a significant amount of money. So Stellantis is one of the few large car companies that has almost no long-term debt. So there's very little structured debt going on at Stellantis, and they have somewhere just under $100 billion of cash in the bank. So Stellantis could, with cash in the bank, buy Nissan and Mazda tomorrow for both of their market capitalizations. Just buy all the shares in the open market and wholly buy those car companies. And the only other car company that could do that is Toyota. So they have that much money. The question is, you know, how long is it going to take them to burn through it if they can't sell anything and their sales continue to slide? That's my worry. I think their pricing got a little out of control.
Yeah, a lot of companies did, but yeah,
Hmm.
that's a huge part of it. I don't have enough information on this to give an accurate description or
What do you think of
assessment.
their product lineup? That's probably a better question in a way.
Narrow that down for me. Are you talking a singular company or?
Yeah, I mean Dodge, Ram, Chrysler, Jeep, the core Stellantis things in the U.S. Like, what do you think of the canary in the coal mine of the American auto industry?
I think Dodge is going through an identity turnover. Um,
Hmm.
it's it's interesting. I like I've mentioned, I recently had that Ram. I think that's
Hmm.
a great revision to a long running truck and powertrain. I think that's going to be a major seller once people get their hands on it, get the experience, and
Hmm.
find what reliability is like. In terms of Jeep, I don't know enough or don't have
Mm.
enough personal experience with it to really give a fair assessment to it. It- I if I was in the market,
If someone says Jeep, though, what do you think? It's like, is this a positive vibe? Is it a negative vibe? Like, what are you
mm,
thinking?
well, I mean, I think whenever someone says Jeep, my first thought is always Wrangler.
Well, yeah, that's how Jeep wants it.
Most people are that
Yeah,
way.
Jeep wants everybody's thought about Jeep to be Wrangler first, get you in the dealer, and go, oh,
They're very
there's a
expensive.
Grand Cherokee that I could get instead.
Yeah,
You
both
know,
Ram, Jeep, very expensive.
this is a good question. If you could kill one of those brands in the U.S., which one would be it? I think Chrysler would have to be it,
Chrysler for sure.
which is sad because Chrysler's the origin story of the North American side, which is definitely sad. Um, no one knows what's going to happen to Chrysler. Supposedly they have about 2 years or so um, to make it or break it, but there's nothing in the pipeline. They've got a minivan and that's it now. So that's kind of sad. Their North American lineup feels stale and hasn't adapted. Some of the things sell still relatively well. The minivan is still the best-selling segment, even though it's ancient. The Ram 1500 actually was selling very well until they had the Hurricane production stumble. Apparently, sales are back up to where they should be now, though. Grand Cherokee has always clung on with very large margins. So some of the tricky thing with them, and this is where I would say the business side is a different thing than the sales numbers game, because if you can sell fewer widgets, but you sell them for a lot more money, then is that bad? That's the question. It's obviously not bad for the shareholders because they're making a lot of money. Is it bad for the company's future? That's a different question. That's where I think there's more concern. And it sort of depends on whether or not Jeep can continue to elevate their brand to the point where people are continuing to be willing to spend that much money on them. I will say that when you look at the average transaction price data, that Jeeps are significantly more expensive. Actual transaction price, people pay more for them than almost all of the direct competitors. I mean, they are very close to German luxury brand average transaction price territory. And Wagoneer is another example. There were a lot of complaints that Wagoneer was a terrible idea because it wasn't selling in the same numbers as Suburban and Tahoe and Navigator and Expedition. But that average transaction price is way beyond the Lincoln Navigator. It's up there with Cadillac. So, I don't know if that was the wrong decision either. They're making a lot of money on it. They're just not selling as many as people, I think, thought.
That's bad for Alfa Romeo.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Alpha, they could ditch Alpha in the US, let's be honest. Alpha or Maserati, just pick one and stick with it. Like, just smush those two together, call that good. I mean, if I could wave my magic wand, what I would do to fix Stellantis, I think, would be stop calling it a Ram, just jam Ram and Dodge back together. Ford sells everything under 2 nameplates. Why do we need so many here? Bring some cheap Renaults from Europe, some cool, funky, weird things, stick some Chrysler logos on them, and that could be the fix for Chrysler. What harm could it cause? I mean, they're already there. The Peugeots look kind of cool. Let's just call some of those some Chryslers. Merge Alpha and Maserati into one thing. Just forget about that puppy. And then just focus on some cheaper models.
Do you think Jeep would be a company without the Wrangler?
No, I mean, there are other
I know that's a
models.
loaded question,
Other
but
models sell well in the lineup, but it's so iconic that Wrangler is so much of that brand that I think they couldn't live without it.
yeah, like Ryan said, they sold out of their $105,000. That's insane. That's
I
insane
mean,
to me.
the Hellcats just printed cash. That was all Hellcats did. It's a money tree, and there's clearly a lot of market for that.
Let's see here. What else we got? Any plans on Nissan Xterra?
Sounds like a no. So
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like that is ever going to happen again.
No, they didn't say specifically when I was there. Or did they? Have you heard something? Maybe they just left it out of the.
We've heard the answer is no. Supposedly,
Okay.
there's just no money there. And let's move on to the last question, because we have to end this live show at 5:30 Pacific. So Drew's been asking a lot of questions today. There, what do we think about the 911? Do we think Porsche could survive without its iconic nameplate? I would go with no. That's another one of those things. Like there are vehicles that don't make financial sense that must exist for some other marketing reason, and I would say 911 is that. Mazda Miata is definitely that for Mazda. Like I think doesn't matter how much money it loses, as long as the company, as long as there's marketing value in that. Mustang is probably in that group for Ford. Some of those products, Wrangler for Jeep, obviously, even though those make money, I think that even if they stopped making money, they would still need to exist for some other reason. The Halo car effect, a lot of people discount, And I would say a specific Halo model that is resurrected somewhere out of nowhere, that can die. Like Viper didn't need to exist. But Hellcat, in a way, took that mantle for Dodge. And that is some of those questions around, like, what's the future of some of these car brands as they transition to a different future? Like, what's Dodge going to be without Hellcat in that kind of position?
It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
It's gonna be very
So
interesting.
hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Of course, all of you are probably subscribers because you're watching a live stream. So thanks for that. And we will see all of you later. If you haven't checked out the podcast, be sure and check out that. There's a new episode dropping next week. You'll find that on the podcast YouTube channel or on your favorite podcasting platform. And then, find us on the Facebooks and the Instagrams.
Thanks, guys.